Yesterday, strong winds caused lots of damage in southern Colorado. Last night, we showed you a tree toppled over onto a house on 8th and Rudd in Canyon City. One person is dead and another hurt in the arrest of Ammon Bundy. Officials also want to remind you that if you're ever uncertain about whether the person attempting to pull you over is actually a law enforcement officer, you should pull over in a safe, well-lit public location and call 911. Police have arrested a suspect in Saturday night's hit-and-run crash that killed a pedestrian. We are getting reports that there is more gunfire taking place right now. We do know from earlier that 3 police officers were injured during that earlier shooting, but then we have had reports that there has been more gunfire happening just within the last half hour. So CSPD tweeting that out as well. And we do know that 4 victims were taken to Penrose, Maine. We got that confirmed from the public information officer there. Lauren, the fire started here around 1 this afternoon and spread quickly with the help of strong winds. Firefighters say that the fire grew from 1 acre to 10 acres in just a matter of 20 minutes. And earlier this evening, fire crews responded to a 3rd fire, this one happening at Citadel South storage units off Bijou Street. The fire started just before 5 o'clock in a storage unit that some people believe had a couple living inside. History is made in Paris today as a global climate agreement is now official. And this begins our look around the world tonight. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady have met 4 times in the playoffs and are 2-2, with the home team winning each of those matchups. We'll have highlights from today's game coming up a little bit later in sports. Although the Broncos were predicted to win this one, local Steeler fans had high hopes their team could pull off the win. Fox Bruin's Kaylin McMacken joins us now with more. Kaylin? It may have felt like a mild beginning to winter from the south all the way up to the northeast, but all of that is about to change, and fast, as a potentially historic winter storm rolls in. Fox's Joel Waldman has the latest from Washington. Since the show started, about 5 minutes have passed, meaning your time to get out of a fire is up. We are now coming to you from the shopping center where this all began late yesterday morning. Just over my shoulder to the left is the Planned Parenthood clinic where this all ended. Deputies say they went to Martin Wirth's home on high alert because of his previous run-ins with the law, but they say they never expected the eviction to turn into a deadly shootout. In fact, back in 2014, deputies served Wirth with a similar eviction notice, and it ended peacefully. Time now for the Rocky Mountain Honda Dealer Sports Report. Ahead of Sunday's showdown, many of you are showing off your Broncos pride, and this guy's sure got a whole lot of it. I'm sure the team would just love that. Well, if you're still not sold on one of the presidential candidates, a new one may be joining the race. Who that is and what it will take for them to enter a little later. Also still ahead, the East Coast is not alone in dealing with winter woes. The trouble in China, too. But first, here's Aisha. The ice rink here at Acacia Park has closed up for the season, but Story Coffee Company is still open for business, serving some of the best coffee in town out of just 160 square feet.
If you're headed out for... Yikes! What are you doing?
Some Halloween fun.
Oh, we can't be clowning around here.
You were disappearing over there. Did you not even notice?
Felt a little funny.
So for people who are a little kitchen challenged like myself and we just want to order the wings, where can people find you? Happening now, today marks the 25th anniversary of the United Flight 585 crash in Whitefield Community Park. All 25 people on board were killed after the plane went down just 4 miles from the Colorado Springs airport. For years, it was believed that wind shear played a role in the crash, but nearly 10 years later, the NTSB found there was a problem with the design of the rudder. In September of 2000, Boeing was required to retrofit the thousands of 737s in service.
He didn't have to respond. This wasn't his jurisdiction, so to speak. But he knew that there were people in danger.
44-year-old Officer Garrett Swayze was one of the first to respond November 27 when calls came over the radio that backup was needed for an active shooter.
He just was always willing to go. There was no way any of us could have kept him here yesterday.
Knowing others were in harm's way, Officer Swayze put himself directly in the line of fire.
We got one officer down behind that building to your south. He's not moving. It's a UCCS officer we're trying to get.
Unfortunately, with this tragic situation today, we have to confirm that we have 2 civilian casualties on scene, and we have the death of 1 police officer.
He answered the call, and he paid for it with his life.
Swayze worked the last 6 years for the University of Colorado Springs Police Force, and those who knew him say his willingness to protect his community isn't surprising.
He's that kind of guy.
He was willing to take that risk, that cost. That wasn't just his job, that was his calling as a Christian.
Swayze was a dedicated husband of 17 years, the father of 2 young children, and a friend to many.
as a friend, I mean, they don't get any better, for sure. He's always such a loyal and loving person, and he always wanted to make sure that we were always, everybody was taken care of.
Before he chose a life of law, Swayze laced up a different type of boots.
He was sort of passionate about everything. Everything was done with a great big giant smile, and he had fun in life.
A talented ice dancer, Swayze was a 1992 U.S. Junior Ice Dance champion.
Garrett is, or was, the most selfless person I knew. Always there as kind of my confidant, my brother.
He's still in my heart like a little brother, so yeah, very. Sorry.
Just a day after Swayze's death, UCCS and the community came together to remember him and the life he lived.
And I am proud to have you here to honor our fallen mountain lion, Garrett Swayze.
When he walked in a room and he smiled, he had a smile that just lit up the room, and you knew that he was genuine and he was real.
We're not going to be defined by this tragedy, and Garrett would not want us to be. We will be defined by the support we provide to Rachel and the children.
When I was talking with Rachel, she knew Garrett would not go. She knew, and she said to me that he knew the risks, and he loved what he did.
His life cut short, but lived to the fullest.
Believers say they can be up to 10 feet tall and weigh more than 1,000 pounds. But could a giant creature like that really be lurking in our woods? Bigfoot sightings have been reported across the nation, but one small town in Colorado seems to have more activity than most.
Bailey's becoming known as a Bigfoot hotspot.
Nestled against the Pike National Forest, Bailey is home to about 9,000 residents, tons of wildlife, and potentially dozens of Sasquatches.
He met a local lady who had just had a Bigfoot sighting, and he was so excited because he said, wow, that means they're here.
Jim and Daphne Myers co-own the Sasquatch Outpost in town, home of all things squatchy, including evidence of their existence.
He put this big map up on the wall, and people just started coming in, and they wanted to tell us their sightings and their stories. And I have to admit, I started off as I was just humoring him. And as these people started coming in and telling their stories, I had to say, wow, you really did see this two-legged hairy creature, and you're not making this up. So I became a believer myself.
This was an imprint of an elk's body we found in the snow. It had been running, and it was defecating as it ran, which I don't see very often when I'm hunting. The strange thing was there were no elk prints leaving this site. There were no predator prints, there was no blood, and there was no body, no elk body. And the elk was gone. So we just never know what we're going to find when we go out.
The back of the shop has now been transformed into a Bigfoot museum and a place to let your imagination run wild.
This is a frame from the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage. It was filmed in 1967 in Northern California. Still to date is the quintessential Bigfoot sighting. There was no technology in 1967 to create a suit that had breasts that bounced. Even the Academy Award-winning costume designer for the original Planet of the Apes said he could not have made a suit like this. They know she was 7 feet 6 inches tall, and by the impression of her feet in the sand and just the body mass, they estimated she weighed in the realm of 900 pounds.
But if the stories and evidence in the Bigfoot Museum aren't enough to convince you, you can sign up for one of their squatching adventures and head out into the woods to search for your own evidence, which is exactly what photojournalist Ray Harless and I did next.
Ray, we're going squatching.
Abbie and Ray from Fox 21 News in Colorado Springs, and Daphne is with us, and Kevin Lynn. And we're going to see what activity we can get tonight.
That's a dog.
That's a dog. They hoop, they scream, they talk, they chatter, like you hear people talking in the woods, but you can't make out the words. They knock on trees and clack rocks together. And this stick is my tree knocker. So when we get back farther, we'll knock some and see if anybody's out there who wants to knock back. Woo! Nobody wants to play yet.
That scared me.
Why don't one of you ladies try a call? See what happens. Why don't you try, Abbie? We've hooped, we've whatever Kevin does, screech howls.
I think Ray meowed once.
Meowed. We've whistled. We've not had any replies so far.
While we didn't have any encounters on our Squatch Watch, others say they have, and not too far from where we were. In late July of this year, Kevin Lynn and a friend set up camp along the Colorado Trail in the Lost Creek Wilderness area.
Starting to get dark, so we decided we needed to try to find a flat area to set up camp and also get a fire going. Yeah! So we did some calls and some tree knocks that night. And, you know, after about, I'd say 11 p.m. or so, we kind of settled in and decided to just go ahead and call it a night. Probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning again. We heard loud tree knocks and whooping or calls from some sort of creature or more than one, because we were hearing things from behind our tent as well as out in front of our tent.
This is the actual audio Kevin says he recorded that night.
And the only thing we could figure is they were maybe calling between each other and they knew we were there. We were actually got to a point where we just couldn't go to sleep again because it was repeated for a few hours.
So is Bigfoot out there?
Give me an hour and an open mind and I'll convince you.
Do you believe?
It only takes one sighting and you're an instant believer.